A few cents of syrup. That's the actual product. Picture Coca Cola, and you probably picture a delivery truck or a red cooler humming in the back of a gas station. Almost none of that belongs to the company whose name is on the can. Coca Cola sells the syrup, and it collects a toll on every gallon that moves. That toll built a fortress worth around $360 billion. It's sitting in your retirement account right now, whether you drink the stuff or not. It shapes your grocery bill. Some of it got built with your tax money. So this isn't a video about sugar being bad for you. You already know that. It's about a machine most of us have been drinking from our whole lives without ever seeing how it's wired. Coca Cola barely makes drinks. The parent company manufactures concentrated syrup, a cheap, shelf-stable base that ships in drums, and that's pretty much the whole physical product coming out of headquarters. Everything downstream belongs to somebody else. Independent bottlers own the plants and the trucks. They're the ones buying the concentrate, adding the water and the fizz, canning it, and hauling it to every store. All the heavy, low-margin costs of refrigeration and labor and fuel sits on their books, not Coca-Cola's. Coca-Cola keeps the light end. It sells the syrup and collects a royalty on the volume that flows through the system. Low capital costs, high margins. Money that comes in whether soda sales are up a little or down a little, because bottlers keep buying concentrate either way. Think about what that structure really is. It's a toll booth. The bottlers built the highway and bought the trucks. Coca-Cola owns the booth at the on-ramp and takes a cut of everything that drives past. The company you think of as a beverage giant is closer to a licensing operation wearing a beverage costume. And once you see the toll, the obvious question follows. If the money lives in the royalty, then the real job is guarding the road every drink travels. Brewing a better soda barely moves the needle. Which brings us to the second half of the machine. Distribution. A great product doesn't win the beverage aisle, shelf space wins the beverage aisle. And Coca-Cola has spent a century turning shelf space into something a competitor physically cannot buy its way into. Start with the coolers. Those branded refrigerators you see in gas stations and delis. Coca-Cola supplies a lot of them, and the deal is simple. Free cold storage for the shop, as long as the shop fills it with Coca-Cola. So the company never has to fight for a slot on the shelf. It already owns the coldest, most reached-for point in the store. Then the exclusive contracts. A fast food chain, a stadium, a university signs a deal to pour one company's drinks and nobody else's. Walk up to most fast food counters in America and you literally cannot buy a Pepsi, not because of taste, because somebody signed a contract. Now stack ubiquity on top. The more places Coca-Cola is, the more retailers feel they have to carry it, which puts it in even more places. It feeds itself. So picture a rival with a genuinely better soda and a real marketing budget. Doesn't matter. To reach a customer, they need a shelf. The best shelves are under contract. The cold spot already has a Coca-Cola cooler humming in it. You can't outcompete a shelf you're not allowed to stand on. That's the moat. It isn't the taste, it's the real estate.
Put the toll booth and the moat together, and you get a set of financials that look almost unfair. Coca-Cola's gross margin runs around 61.7% as of early 2026. For every dollar of product sold, roughly 61 cents is left after the cost of making it. That's software company territory, coming out of a business that sells flavored sugar water. A big piece of that is pure economies of scale. At Coca-Cola's volume, each extra gallon of syrup costs almost nothing to make. The market cap sits near $360 billion as of July, and the company just posted 5% organic revenue growth through 2025. Where does that pricing power come from? A brand people don't switch away from. When the name is strong enough, you can raise the price and barely lose a customer. Economists call that low price elasticity. You can just call it loyalty that survives a price hike. And Coca-Cola takes that lever further than almost anyone through something worth naming: need state pricing. The same can of Coke costs about 50 cents at a grocery store and around $4 at a stadium. Same product, same syrup. The price has nothing to do with what the can costs to make. It tracks one thing: how badly you want it and how few other options are in reach. Then there's what the company does with all that cash. When a new competitor actually starts working, Coca-Cola doesn't bother out-innovating it. It just buys it and plugs it into the distribution machine. Smart Water and Vitamin Water through the Glaseo deal, $4.1 billion back in 2007. Topo Chico, $220 million in 2017. Costa Coffee, $5.1 billion in 2019, the biggest acquisition in the company's history. Same move every time. The threat doesn't get beaten, it gets absorbed. And its new owner already controls the roads it would need to grow on. From the outside, the fortress looks like it simply cannot be broken. But every fortress this profitable is sitting on a cost it managed to push off its own books. And here, the finance story gets uncomfortable because part of the bill landed on you. Rewind to the early 1980s. Between 1980 and 1984, the American beverage industry quietly swapped most of its cane sugar for high fructose corn syrup. Why? Public policy made it the cheaper input. Corn subsidies pushed corn prices down. Tariffs on imported sugar pushed cane prices up. So the government's own thumb on the scale made the corn-based sweetener the rational choice. Your tax dollars helped set the cost structure that Coca Cola, PepsiCo, and the big packaged food names like Nestle and Kraft Heinz all then built around. Around that same stretch, adult obesity in America begins a steep climb, tracking closely with the industrialization of the whole food supply. American sugar consumption peaks between 1999 and 2004. I'm not going to dramatize the health numbers because I don't need to. I'll just state them. Roughly 6 in 10 American adults now live with at least one chronic disease. Around 40% have obesity. More than 40 million people have diagnosed diabetes, with over 100 million more in the pre-diabetes range. And close to 90% of the nation's $4 trillion plus annual healthcare spend is tied to chronic and mental health conditions. In economics, there's a plain word for a cost a business creates but doesn't pay: an externality. The profits are private and they sit on Coca-Cola's balance sheet. A big share of the downstream cost is public, and it sits on yours.
Now, a fortress that profitable attracts people who want to tax it, regulate it, or shrink it. So the company does the rational thing a company does. It defends the margin. And the way it defends the margin has a return on investment you can actually measure. Take the clearest example.
Beverage giant Coca Cola funding new research that shifts blame for obesity away from calories.
Yeah, they say people should focus on exercising instead.
Back in 2013, Coca-Cola helped fund a group called the Global Energy Balance Network, putting in around $1.5 million. The group's message was that the real driver of obesity was too little exercise, not too much sugar. Shift the blame from the product to the couch. The New York Times exposed the funding in August of 2015, and the group disbanded that December. But the sharper numbers are in the soda tax fights. When American cities tried to tax sugary drinks, the beverage industry spent to stop them, and you can take that spending and divide it straight by the number of voters. The American Beverage Association put roughly $48.9 million into fighting city soda taxes between 2014 and 2017.
The soda tax is a tax on retail purchases of soda, whether from a store or from a restaurant. In the case of Berkeley, it would be 1 cent per ounce. In the case of San Francisco, it would be 2 cents per ounce.
In Berkeley, California, the industry spent about $1.4 million against one local measure. That works out to around $20 for every voter in the city. In San Francisco, the spending hit about $21 a voter, a 33-to-1 edge over the people supporting the tax. In Philadelphia, the fight ran to roughly $19 million. Read that as a business decision, because that's what it is. This is regulatory capture. A line item, not an accusation. When protecting the toll is worth more than the cost of the lobbying, you spend $20 a voter and you don't blink. For decades, that defense worked against basically everything. A scary documentary would come out, a doctor would sound the alarm, and the fortress would just soak it up, because none of it touched the actual machine. You can warn people about sugar all day. They keep reaching into the cooler. Then something different showed up. A movement branded Make America Healthy Again, MAHA, pushed into the mainstream, led politically by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., now running the Department of Health and Human Services. Let me stay precise here.
I'm not going to tell you MAHA is right or wrong, good or bad. The politics and the health science around it are genuinely contested, and I'll get to the real criticisms in a minute. What matters for this story is narrower. For the first time in a long time, something is aiming straight at the fortress's economics instead of its morality. Every previous attack said the product is bad for you. This one goes after demand and unit costs, the actual plumbing. It reaches for the levers that change how many units move and what each one costs to make. That's a different kind of threat entirely. A health warning asks you to choose differently. A regulation changes the math no matter what you choose.
So what are the levers actually? Not the hyped version. The real one at its real stage as of the middle of 2026. And the precise picture matters because it's more complicated and more interesting than either side tends to admit. Lever 1. SNAP restrictions.
Now to another impact of the government shutdown, the planned freezing of payments to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, better known as SNAP.
This is the concrete one. The Federal Food Assistance Program, SNAP, is where roughly one program's dollars meet the soda aisle, and more than 20 states now have federal waivers barring those dollars from buying soda and candy. The first restrictions took effect at the start of 2026, rolling out state by state into 2027. This is the most real win on the board, and it hits demand directly. Lever 2, the GRAS loophole. GRAS stands for Generally Recognized as Safe, a rule that lets companies self-certify certain ingredients without full review. There's a push to close it, but the rule keeps getting delayed, now pushed to the end of 2026, and it hasn't even been formally proposed yet. Whether the FDA has the authority to force the change is still contested. None of it is final. Lever 3, artificial dyes. You may have heard the dyes are banned. They're mostly not. What actually happened is a voluntary phase-out request. The one hard action, Red 3, had its authorization revoked in January of 2025, with enforcement landing in 2027. Red 40 and the others are still authorized. Big manufacturers have pledged to comply voluntarily over the next couple of years. Finally, Lever 4, front of package labeling. Those warning labels on the front of the box, proposed in early 2025, still in the comment period. Final rule slipped. Once it's final, companies would get a few years to comply. 2 of 4 levers are still just paper. 1 is voluntary. Precision is the whole point here.
And precision cuts both ways, so here's the honest case on both sides, stated plainly, because both halves of it are true. The industry's defense isn't nonsense. Sugar is legal, it's disclosed on the label, and adults choose it. When Britain brought in its soft drinks industry levy, it drove genuine market-wide reformulation, not just a public relations shuffle. Proof that lighter touch policy can work without a federal crackdown. And heavy mandates carry real costs. They can raise prices and squeeze bottling and retail jobs, and those hit lower income households the hardest. The other side has real problems too. Some MAHA leaders have tied legitimate concerns about ultra-processed food to discredited claims about vaccines and fluoride, which muddies the credible part of the message. An early MAHA Commission report cited around 7 studies that turned out not to exist, carrying the fingerprints of AI hallucination, and cuts to NIH and FDA funding threaten the exact research needed to prove any of this in the first place. Both of those things are true at once. You don't have to pick a team to see that.
So does any of this actually dent the fortress? History says yes and no. And the no is the part that matters for your money. First, the levers do work when they're real. Mexico put a tax on sugary drinks in 2014. Purchases dropped about 6% in the first year, on average, around 12% by that December, and roughly 17% among the lowest income households, the ones spending the biggest share of their budget on these drinks. Britain's levy reshaped the entire market. Chile slapped blunt black warning octagons on the front of high sugar products and watched demand for them fall. So the demand lever is not theoretical. Pull it hard enough and volume moves. But watch what Coca Cola does in response. It doesn't fight to the death and fold. It adapts. Under Britain's levy, it reformulated and pushed Coca Cola Zero Sugar hard to duck the top tax band. It keeps growing the no sugar and diet side, from Diet Coke to Coca Cola Zero Sugar, and when it wants a healthier image, it just buys one. Smartwater, Topo Chico, Costa. and runs those brands through the same toll booth and the same moat it already owns. So here's what actually happens. Regulation reroutes the toll road. It very rarely demolishes one. Traffic gets nudged into a slightly different lane, and the booth quietly follows it there.
Which is exactly why this lands back on you in 3 ordinary places: your retirement account, Coca Cola's an S&P 500 staple and a dividend king, which means it sits inside the broad index funds most people hold without ever picking it. Your grocery bill, reformulate the recipe, shrink the premium can, nudge the price, whatever the product does next, the toll still gets collected on it. And your tax dollars, the subsidies that made the sweetener cheap, and the food assistance money that flows through the aisle. Public policy helped build this cost structure, and public policy is now slowly trying to redirect it. So it's worth separating the real change from the theater. Which parts actually move the money, and which parts just move headlines?
So the takeaway: Coca Cola was never really a drinks company. It's a toll road built on a nutrient. And you don't demolish a toll road with regulation. You reroute it, and the booth just moves with the traffic. If this changed how you see the red can, tell me in the comments. Are you rethinking what's actually in your index fund?